now. All right, welcome to the restart of the Open Team In-Depth series. I'm Doran Cox, Project Director for Open Team, and we're going to join today with Christine Sue and PastureMap, and we're gonna dive in. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Christine.
Hi, folks. Glad to see so many people on the call, some familiar faces. But for the purposes of this call, we're going to start at the very beginning, assuming that folks are not familiar with PastureMap. So even though I know a lot of folks are. So high-level overview, and please do ask questions as we go along. PastureMap is a software platform that is ranch management on web and Android and iOS. So we have native apps on all three. We have a REST API, and we have a native Android app and we have an iOS app. And what you're looking at right now is the web app, where we recommend that ranchers set everything up. So I'm going to go through several different modules, and we'll see how far we get. But essentially, our foundation is forage management. So everything is based in holistic management principles, and our goal is to help the rancher and the ranch team be able to save time and get on the same page more quickly. We started as an educational tool that I built in grad school with my co-founder, and our goal is to help the next generation that's coming into succession be able to understand what's happened on the land for the many years before they got here, again, using holistic management principles. So I probably won't belabor drawing a pasture, but it's similar to many other interfaces that you have that you've used. We use Google Maps and Mapbox, and our satellite imaging comes from Digital Globe as well. So there's a variety of different satellite imaging that different ranches, depending on where they are geographically, can get. For folks who are doing remote sensing and understand this, like the images that are publicly available through these third-party providers tend to be several years old, and depending on where you are in rural areas, one might be more recent than the other. So we just give the optionality for people to find the one that works best for them. This is a ranch in Nebraska, in the Sandhills, that we have already drawn up. You can also put in KMLs if you have an NRCS or somebody who's done the GPS for you. You can just upload KMLs into PastureMap and they can already be done. I'm going to eliminate some of these data layers here, and I'll go through them just so you can see more clearly what's going on with the pastures. Also, we'll reduce this. Okay, so when you first start, you set up your pastures and you set up your herds. Okay, and then because we built this for regenerative grazing, we also built the ability to draw subdivisions, and I will go through and draw a subdivision for folks to see how easy that is. So you basically point and click and draw pastures, and then to subdivide, as people want to do fence planting, you just this is the same UI that we use for drawing pastures. You just drop something outside the fence line and then go ahead and click and draw lines to finish. There we go. There we go. So, and then you can drag them around, because often people will have riparian areas. The boundaries may not be straight. If someone's strip grazing or just doing like a pivot that's a pie shape, that's a little easier, but we built maximum flexibility into this UI. And then as I'm moving, you can see that it's changing the acreage, so people can figure out what the acreage is of the feed that they're fencing off before they go out and build the fence. And so how this is most often used is for folks who are planning temporary paddocks with electric fencing and trying to figure out, even down to the sub-acre, like we go to 1 decimal point. So not every pasture is going to be 200 acres. Right? This is fairly large. Actually, this is a fake paddock. But we have people who have like 3-acre pastures that they want to break out if they're rotating multiple times a day. And it gets down pretty accurate. So what people will usually do is draw the subdivisions, and then it syncs to their iPhone, right? And so your iPhone turns into a GPS. Those subdivisions get loaded onto your phone, and then you actually go out and physically walk the pasture with the fence as you're building it. And sometimes like the accuracy in the field is about 10 feet, give or take. So it's depending on where your cell towers are, but it's pretty accurate. And so people will then do a second pass and walk the line that they actually want to build and tap that on their phones. And the UI is very similar on the phone, except that the points are a little bigger for your thumb to move around. And then they give it to their ranch hand to build the fence. Any questions on that so far? Nope. Okay. So I'm not gonna belabor.
Hey, sorry, sorry, Christine, I had you on mute there, but I do have a question. I'm curious, when we think about the context of Open Team, will the quadrants that folks are drawing in PastureMap be able to move into FarmOS and vice versa?
I mean, that's all what Dorn and I are discussing. So we don't have anything nailed down for what we are going to make available to Open Team. I will say that we, as everybody else in regenerative grazing, want to see technology be used by as many farms as possible. So data interoperability is like, it really depends on what the Open Team community feels like would be useful to ask us to build interoperability into. But the way that we pass information is through our REST API. Oh, by the way, these are GeoJSON files. So it should be fairly easy, but I haven't had the conversations because we just joined. We've been talking about running Open Team for a couple of years, but I haven't been privy to the conversations about what your data protocols are.
Great, thank you.
When we have pasture, so this is the main thing that I want to show you guys. We built a forage forecast module because so many ranchers that we work with are just beginning to do holistic management or are just starting to go from set stock grazing into better planned grazing. So if you've been a holistic planned grazer for like 10 years, you probably know how much forage you get out of each season and you've got your pastures dialed in, but the vast majority of folks don't. So we built a forage forecast module that helps pull in NRCS soil survey maps where they're available, and there's pretty good coverage across the Midwest. California, not so much, and East Coast a little bit different. But as you use PastureMap, the idea is to give you a baseline of where the NRCS soil survey says your forage production is in a wet, normal, or dry year, translate that into animal days per acre or AUMs or whatever forage measure you use. So actually, this is a bunch of math. So what this does is it pulls from the NRCS web soil survey. It tells you based on this acreage that we've drawn, what the NRCS estimates in a wet, normal, and dry years, and translates it into ADAs because web soil survey does it in dry matter pounds per acre, which is also here. And then it also translates to AUMs. It also translates to ADAs and ADs. And so that just, ADs is a lot. Nobody really does that. So what we want to do is just make it really simple for people to start to get a handle on their grazing forage availability. And then some folks are like, well, I actually know that the NRCS estimates are off by some factor for us. And so here is where we explain what the season forage estimate is, and then how you can translate that information into your actual grazing program. So this here is where you can estimate how many ADAs you think you will actually get out of this pasture. And then there's quite a lot of education that we've learned that we are teaching ranchers, because even the take half leave path, a lot of people start with take half leave path, but really in forage utilization, a harvest efficiency is maybe 50% of that half, right? And then 25%, so it's 25, 25, 50. You want to leave 50% RDM, but then when the animals are actually moving through, you may be wasting or trampling a bunch, and then you're actually harvesting 25%, right? So this is a very conservative estimate of what you will actually eat, what you'll actually have your animals harvest. So we explain that here, and then we show you what that would look like in a wet, normal, dry, based on NRCS estimates. And then some people with high intensity, we call it adaptive, the adaptive managed grazing that's like super high stock density, are getting more, right? Because they're pushing animals closer together. And so here, kind of baked in here, is the rationale to explain to someone why you might want to rotate at a higher density, because you'll be able to utilize more of your forage more efficiently, but in numbers for them. And they can put it, some folks that we're working with that are like over 1 million pounds per acre of stock density say that they can get 40%. I'm not a range scientist, like I can't endorse what you think you're gonna take off of the pasture, but you can put in whatever that is and it'll automatically calculate for you how many animal days per acre that translates into. So let's just say I think it's gonna be 45%. Right, so it'll translate into that. And you may want to run multiple scenarios on, okay, maybe a drought year, maybe I'm just gonna be conservative and estimate that I can get 26 ADAs out of here. So that's your season forage estimate for how much forage you're gonna harvest off of that particular paddock that goes there. And then as you graze your animals through, it will tell you how much you've taken so far. And I'll get into the math of how we do that. But this is the end goal, basically allowing people to know how many days, how many ADAs you thought you were gonna get out of the pasture and where you are during the season. And basically there's a little cow icon here that will graze down. Let me pause there because I just do a lot of grazing math. Let's see if people have questions. Okay, so this is an estimate of, this is what it looks like. And so that grazing math there, if people don't do it and people just want to know, I want to know how much I've taken and I have no idea what the estimates are, they don't have to put it for PastureMap to work. So the idea is to meet people wherever they are and help them just start to get a handle on their forage utilization. I'll go through and explain the herds now. So each of these herds, we've built a herd module where when you start out with a herd, you put in, you can start fresh in PastureMap, or you can upload if you have RFIDs and individual ear tags with a weight record. Usually it comes out in a CSV. And so we allow people to import that. We have a script for that. Or they can start fresh, right? So let's say stockers, and we start with average 1,000 pounds. Let's say they're 100. Let's say there's 250 here for the season, and then what day they start on the pasture. Let's just say they start here, and then their average weight when they're weighed. So every time they get weighed, it updates in PastureMap down to the individual animal, which I'll show you, and then how much average daily gain you're planning to put on them, and how much pounds per day of dry matter intake. So we just do all that math for you. Let's say 2.5, or let's say 4 if they're moms, right? 3 is what we recommend, and then the math will actually automatically update there. So let's say 2. Whoops, I went too fast. Anyway, it would update, and then you put them in a pasture, put them in the flat, and how long you plan to graze them for. And then that's how they show up on the map. So now they've been created, and I'll show you how we store the data there. So this is your dashboard for the animals. Because I put in that it was 2017, it looks like they've been gaining on a straight line up to 2019. But it would be more realistic if you usually do it for a single season. And every time you put in a weighing event, there are multiple toggles here. You can add animals, you can remove animals, delete them, switch them between herds. We made so each herd is tracked at the individual animal level. So I just did 250, right? I bulk created that herd, but then each individual animal here actually has a lifetime record associated with it that we all just created just now, 250 of them. And right now their entire lifetime has been, they were added to herd stockers and then they were weighed at 800 pounds. But you can actually select individual animals and move them or call them between herds, and then the lifetime records of everything that's happened to them will go along with it. So this helps people who are sorting frequently or who are finishing on like as animals reach market weight, who are frequently moving them between different herds. The main use case for this dashboard is just to track if animals are on track and are they actually gaining what we thought they were going to gain. So this is a projection right now, and there will be a dotted line that goes forward. I'm trying to find a different herd that has that better. Let's see if these headers have good records so you can see. But basically, we'll track everything that happens to them. And okay, so here's a projection of where they should be at a certain point, usually the end of the season. And then if you're doing anything, any records like moving them in or weighing them, it'll show up as a record. So it'll show up as a record on your graph to see if you're on track for your projection, as well as here where the details are. Let's find another herd that has some grazing records. Let's see. Yeah, so this is what more of what it would look, a season would look like, right? You'd start the season, you'd weigh them, you'd move in heads, you'd move out some heads. The average weight would go up because probably she moved out the light ones to do something with them, or they're sick. You weigh them, and you're just tracking, and then you cull them, right? So that's, you sell them. So that's what the season looks like for a herd. Any questions on herds? Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to say is that because we put in the average forage consumption, those herds are gaining weight in the system every day. We put 2.5%, or sorry, 2.5 pounds average daily gain, and then 3% dry matter intake, right? So every day, those animals are actually gaining weight in the system, and then as a percentage, their forage intake is also increasing. So that's some mental math that you don't have to do anymore. And ranchers usually just do like just take an average, but we actually get down to the individual animal level on the daily. And then every day that they're actually grazing in a pasture, they are harvesting what their weight time, or their group weight times the percentage of body weight that they're grazing every day, and harvesting that off of the pastures. So that's how we come up with how much forage is grazed from the pasture. You just do all of that grazing math dynamically. And that is how we end up knowing how much has been grazed off of this. So this is, for example, this is a very low ADA estimate, which is probably not realistic, but how much has been grazed so far. And then each individual grazing right. So to move animals on PastureMap, you just click. I showed you earlier, like just move or suspend grazing if you're culling them, and you just if been 12 is like how many days they've been there. So once you, and on the phone, usually people are moving it on the phone. Let me find a pasture that has more grazing records in it. Each pasture has all of the records of what has been grazed in there. Okay, let's see. North Meadow. So the idea is that you can come in and look at, oh, click the map. Okay, let's see. How about here? View grazing records. Okay, well, each of the grazing records has how many animals and then what their total weight is on the day of move-in, and then what their combined forage intake was. And then if you do put plans or how much utilization, it shows up here. And then if you want to put notes and photos, those also show up there. And then we automatically calculate for you how many animal days per acre you've grazed out of the season and how much forage has been grazed. This is a fairly large herd. Let me pause here again and see if people have questions about grazing. If not, we'll move over to the grazing chart, which is for folks who practice holistic management. This will look very familiar. Again, our goal is to save time and not have you guys spend a lot of time like on pen and paper updating stuff. And what we found was a lot of holistic managers make the plan, put it on the wall, but then you're not actively using it during the season because the plan is changing all the time because you don't know when it's going to rain. you're not actually, you've planned out how much you think you're going to get, but how much you actually got maybe won't happen till you have time to sit down at the end of the season. And by then it's too late to really make dynamic decisions about what you're going to do. And everyone's making those decisions all the time, but kind of fly by the seat of your pants. Look around on your phone and then fill in the grazing chart of what you actually did. So this is today, and then the dotted line is the grazing plan. And then the solid line is the actual and what herd was there, when, for how long. And so you can see that in this case, some of these pastures, you're grazing a lot longer than you thought you were. And that's something to know in the pattern so that you can get ahead and replan in the future. And then we also automatically calculate how many rest days are in between each of the grazings. And so this works for multiple different herds as this ranch has. Each color is a different herd, but on the pasture level, it doesn't matter, right? You want to see how long it was between grazings and how much rest you gave each pasture. And then the same estimates that we talked about over here in ADAs that I showed you in Forage Forecast show up here, and then how much you've taken and how much is remaining. Any questions on the grazing chart? Questions?
A lot of progress since the last time you presented, Christine.
Yeah, we spent 2 years building out the grazing chart. That was, I mean, as you imagine, there's a lot of manipulation of data to make sure that it shows up correctly and in a way that makes sense to ranchers. And it also helps, there's gaps here that show, just basically help keep folks accountable to make sure that your grazing records are filled in right. But the idea is to take out as much manual work as possible. Again, like I'm showing you a ton of data, but like the rancher doesn't actually have to put in any of this data. They just make the herds, move the herds around, and this data automatically populates. Other things that have happened since the last time we spoke, probably showing the number of data layers that we've added. So we've been pretty simple on this interface so far. There's a lot of bells and whistles that you can add. So gates, water troughs, we found that it's very useful for managing temporary staff and folks that didn't grow up on the ranch, just knowing, like having a name for everything, having a name for every pasture. Anyone on the phone can actually just go and search anything, like, okay, let's say whatever, Kerns, that would show up. And you can it'll just take you right there on the phone. I'm just going to load here a little bit more slowly, but it'll take you right there. And if you're on the phone, the phone is a GPS, so it'll show you a dot of where you are, so you know where you're supposed to go. And so the staff who are actually tasked with moving cattle will be able to, the manager does the grazing planning, and then every day you can all just get on the phone together and be like, okay, this is where we're supposed to go. Where is that? Oh, okay, I know exactly where that is. All right, I've done that. What's the next move? Where are the gates in this pasture? How am I actually going to logistically make this happen? We also have terrain, right? So if you're going uphill or downhill for planning purposes, but just finding things we found is particularly for the really large ones. Like people use these for water troughs, but they also use them for where the pipe is buried and what valve they are. And so each of the items, you can go and take photos of them. And then we also have the windmill with pump, just so you know what you're getting yourself into out in the field. And then there's another one that a lot of people use as tasks. So a lot of people use it as like, I don't know what this is, tunnel, and fence repair right here. So people will go out and if you notice something when you're out riding, or on the ATV and you don't have the equipment, you can take a photo on PastureMap and tag it with what needs to be done, and then that syncs to everyone's phones. And so people can just go out if they have spare time or know that there's an other out there and they happen to be riding out there, then it just saves a lot of back and forth of on-farm tasks. I think Jordan also wanted me to show the soil data part. So
soils and biodiversity.
Soils and biodiversity, perfect. Yeah, I'll start with biodiversity because this part is photo monitoring is the most important thing for that. I don't actually know if we have photo monitoring on this demo account, so unfortunately, I don't think so. This ranch doesn't monitor, but just like we have layers of soil. Actually, I'm gonna switch to a different account. If you hold on for a sec, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm actually gonna go into a different account that has it so that you can see it. Okay. Let me know when you can see it.
It's back up.
Okay, so this is Tomcat Ranch, which many of you will be familiar with. I'm gonna, again, delete all of these, just not show up. Okay, they use other as photo monitoring points. And then soil points I'll get to in a bit. But photo monitoring, so this is what photos look like. You can take photos on your phone. Your phone is a GPS, so within that like several foot radius. It's not like super pinpoint accurate, but it's like pretty good. You can take a photo at any point, it will tag it with the GPS location, and then we can click in and see the photos. And we do not have protocols, because everyone's got their own protocol, so we just let you take whatever photos you want, and you can use Point Blue's protocol, you can use NRCS protocol, but it tags with like what the date is and what notes they want to take with it. So somebody, see, this is a top-down one. And then we have, you know, being able to scroll to see what previous images they may have wanted to take. Some people take multiple, see this one took multiple on the same date. But the idea is you can scroll through like a gallery to see how that pasture is responding to your grazing. And then there's no place for notes right here, so I'm going to show you where in the pasture.
I'll just interrupt you quickly, Christine, because we've got, I think, some land PKS folks, and this would be a great place to log our land PKS integrations.
Anyone want to say things about integration?
Or, you know, I'll just tag that.
Okay, yeah. This is photo monitoring is something we've wanted to do more of, but honestly, it's most of the monitoring stuff, like the soil, is grant funded, and so it's really dependent on what resources we're able to get for it. Because as you know, ranchers don't have resources for something that's not directly benefiting their gains or, you know, their forage inventory. So as you guys know, Tomcat's got resources and interns to do inventory, so they do better inventory. So they do, you know, this is all the records of their inventories. And then find a photo. There we go. Okay, so there's some of the inventories will have photos with them, and then they will note the graves slowly, blah, 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 lots of mature parting and orchard grass. So this is just notes for everyone. So it doesn't matter who took it. Everyone has that. Many of our ranchers actually share their PastureMap accounts with their NRCS officers as well as their landowners. And so everyone is on the same page about what the goals are for this pasture. You can come in and remind yourself. So that's how the photos show up. And we don't have a ton of indicators here, right? It's just available dry matter or available grazing days and the photo. But if people want to add more indicators like litter and percent surface, like soil cover, those are certainly indicators that we'd be happy to just open up the code base for here for people to just build into it. So that's pasture inventory and photo monitoring. We have been working with Point Blue Conservation Science for the past couple of years, and we have been building in a soil carbon monitoring app. Tomcat has like 4 years of data, and so it's going to be kind of slow to load their account. And they have like thousands of data points. Let's reload. So what happened with Point Blue is that we got 2 grants. One was an NRCS California SIG grant, and then one was another private funder grant that just wanted to see this happen. And as you know, Point Blue gathers soil data at a 10 to 40 0 to 10 centimeter and 10 to 40 centimeter depth. So not super deep, but like 2 layers. And then they also gather wildlife data in the form of bird counts. And then they also gather vegetative sampling data. And these monitoring protocols are fairly extensive. They work with 90 ranches in California, which is why we wanted to work with them, because there's an existing data set there. And we only have the funding to build in the soil monitoring part, which is what I will show you today. But we are very interested in, we're very interested in building out the rest of it, but we just don't have grant funding for that. So that's something to put out to the community if anyone feels called to build this out further. Just wait. Any questions so far? Are other people working with Point Blue?
Hey, Christine, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Patrick from Cool Farm Alliance here. It's great to see that you do have some soil carbon monitoring in there, and certainly that's preferable. I'm wondering if you also have any plans to have soil carbon predictions made where monitoring is not feasible, or where the resources aren't available for that. So, for example,
such a can of worms.
I know, but
well, and I'll jump in there a little bit because I think that's some of the conversation that Christine and I have been having in terms of the exchange of sort of exporting management data, but being able to pull in some of these data sets that the larger community is developing. And so that's where, as Christine said at the top of the call on Britt's question, is that we're still defining sort of that import and export and what's possible to move things back and forth. And before Christine jumps in, now that this is loaded, I'll sort of also prime the conversation in that, we see a great deal of compatibility with the data structure that they're using already with the way PharmOS is structured. So it would be great if we have a little time to look at that import-export in terms of how we can bring in new layers, how can we bring in new data types, and also export what PastureMap is really doing, really detailed management-specific sort of activity data, and the GeoJSON files, which is actually common to PharmOS as well.
Cool.
Yeah, and I mean, even for the Cool Farm tool, which is not a process-based model, just it seems like the data that you're collecting is a real simple plug-in to our model to essentially estimate emissions. So it seems like there could be some low-hanging fruit there.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're asking these questions. We've been asking the same questions with Nori. We've met Indigo Ag. Nori, we know quite a bit better. And so while not speaking for Nori, because I think they're
on the call.
They're on the call. Good. Maybe Nori can jump in, because we've been talking about, my understanding is that having talked to Alden and Christoph, is that model, like Point Blue is facing the same issues as everyone else, which is resources to actually dig the soil pits, and it's cost prohibitive to do it on a yearly basis at multiple data points. So yes, Tomcat has these are all the dig points, and each of these dig points represents, I think, 12 to 30 different, this is the average of, so it's hella data, right? So it's and that's people going out and doing water infiltration tests and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's just not really feasible to imagine a future where all the ranchers are doing this. We love quick carbon too, like the Yale School of Forestry doing that. But everyone's trying to find ways that are simpler. I think people are hurting towards coming towards consensus about using Comet Farm Planner and establish NRCS methodology to estimate the emissions. We're comfortable with that. We like the Comet Farm Planner team too. Colorado State's great. And then also what we would offer as our node of offering into this community is if folks have emissions that are estimated in Comet Farm Planner, but in a state like California where there's not a lot of data, if over a number of years you can see that the actual carbon that is empirically stored by someone who dug a soil pit into the baseline is significantly higher, maybe we could establish a range of more carbon credits given than the average estimate.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, you know, another comment about that is it just seems like, you know, it would be a great opportunity to build some more robust science behind the management techniques that are being, you know, behind holistic management specifically. And so if that data is being gathered extensively and you know, cataloged very explicitly, then it would be much easier than the usual ad hoc collection of soil carbon data.
That's why we went with Point Blue, because Point Blue has a range land monitoring handbook that I'm not sure if folks know. It's completely open source. It's on their website. The protocols are very detailed, but also in line with NRCS recommendations. And so we thought that's a rock solid way to think about it. But yeah, we can't control how other people are gathering soil data. And there's different methodologies, and it's like it's a scientist versus scientist debate that we try to stay out of. But I hear you. It's hard to compare apples to oranges if the actual transect sampling is different or the depths are different. That's something that we haven't built out, but we'd be very happy to again open. The soil carbon stuff is feels like that's something that can be open to the community to build. So we built it to soil carbon 0 to 10, 10 to 40, bulk density with water infiltration as well. So this is the code is written and it's fairly easy to just add more indicators if you want to soil carbon at 12 feet depth. So I'll just show you each of these points comes with GPS point, and then it's just really simple interface of a number of years. So people import to us with, again, a script that we run in CSV format. I'm happy to share. We have a help article on how to format your data so that if it's basically the lat long and the percentage and the date, and we just suck that in and display it like this across the ranch. We have some simple color coding just so people, ranchers can pinpoint, okay, where am I doing well? And is that because I have, I don't know, rotated chickens there, or it was super fertile because I applied compost? Where am I doing poorly? And is that because it's a sandy soil, or is that some other reason? So I'll just demonstrate that really quickly. You saw that we can, the power of PastureMap in this point is to put the data together. So the outcomes are good here. What did I actually do in this pasture, and what were my last 3 years of management that actually yielded that? And then, so we'll go belabor that and go back. So if something's poor, you also want to look in, I haven't showed you this, you might want to rule out that it's just not a suitable place for carbon sequestration. And so reveal soil data, and this one may load pretty slowly because this is directly querying the USDA NRCS database, and pulls in what kinds of soil types are there, just so you can rule that out. And then here's where another point of build out could happen. The UX for this was grant funded, and we didn't really build out a ton, but the biggest complaint that users of Web Soil Survey had was it's really cumbersome. You have to click around a whole bunch of things to even get to the one indicator that you want to see. So we basically just did a data dump. It's you never have to click through Web Soil Survey again. You just click the pasture, do soil data, and then all the things are out here. But UI wise, there's certainly better ways to display this. But it has all the data from all of the different libraries all dumped out here. And then in California, we don't often have this, but in the Midwest, it would also show you what the representative forages are. And this is where we pulled out the high, medium, low rainfall forage production indicator to display. So we built out one of those data fields into a UX that's actually pretty, put that into the main PastureMap app.
So, Christine, I wonder if you might walk through a little bit about more in terms of what the API looks like, and also what the process for import and export, because there's clearly export in Excel and import from KML, and just sort of think through both of different types.
Our API is a REST API. It's documented on GitHub, so I can just send that to you guys later. There's instead of walking through it. Also, I'm not the developer, so my CTO can help you with that. But it's pretty straightforward. And then in terms of import export, these are things we build on top. So where are our imports and exports? Ranch settings, team members. Yeah, okay. I'll just show you here that you can have multiple team members, and then okay, so we built exports straight into the app. We used to have a page where you could export a whole bunch of things, but yeah, so you can export a grazing report, and what that will do is what it does is sends an email of an Excel to you, and then so you'll get that in a few minutes, and that'll show each individual pasture with each of the grazing records, and so that's that one. And then so there's multiple different data sources where things go in and out.
Does that Excel have the GeoJSON code for the polygon?
So I'm going to show you where everything is, if that's helpful. So the herds, you can also, so people wanted to export different things for different use cases, right? So you can export all of the herd information as well into an Excel, and that is a different Excel file that we generate with a script again that has each of the herds and then what their grazing records are on a herd level, and then their gains and all this information. So like it's a data dump of all of that. And then on the pastures is where I think you export all of the pastures I think we export into a shape file. And then you can upload a KML here into PastureMap. And then there is a place where we can also export. So you can basically upload a KML and we'll read it. And then there is somewhere, but let me find where it is. Oh, here we go. Okay, export all the KMLs. You can select individual pastures to export, and it'll just so it's not so cumbersome. Or you can export all the pastures, and that'll be the whole thing. And then you download that basically, and it downloads into a KML file right here. And then you can also export a shapefile, pasture grazing report, which we showed earlier. So those are our import-export mechanisms. So other than KMLs and shapefiles, everything exports into a CSV.
Got it. I'm gonna hand off to other folks, and back to you, Christine, to ask.
Yeah, just here for whatever questions
Nope.
folks have.
I
don't know what of this was useful to you, because everyone's got their own different use cases that they're building, but very open to collaboration.
Yeah, but there's a chat question from Christoph. He's on mute.
Oh, I'm unmuted now. I was both on the screen and by phone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would love to wave a magic wand and see all of us on this call working together under Open Team, establishing a reference network that includes groups like Tomcat Ranch to basically make it compatible for ranchers that don't have good soil sampling data. And so just curious how PastureMap can swoop in there to sort of go above and beyond to potentially be a maintainer of that reference or be able to share information on that reference network. Because I believe that's something that both the team at Colorado State University and NRCS would get behind kind of immediately and hopefully throw funding behind too.
Yeah, we're open to it for sure. It's in line with our mission. The whole point of this was to digitize the data so that it can be useful for the regenerative ag movement. In terms of our data privacy agreement, we are very rancher focused. So I will say we don't own the data. The data privacy agreements that we have when people sign up for PastureMap in our terms and conditions are that they own their data forever. If they ever delete their PastureMap account, we will wipe it. And then by using PastureMap and subscribing to our software, they grant us a license to like use the data and display it. So we're basically a service provider. And if we were to share data, I think we do have the aggregate anonymized rights to pass it around in our own, in our own app ecosystem, so that we can, like, you know, put libraries and stuff, that we can, so we can pass around different apps to make PastureMap work. But if we were going to share it with a third party like Open Team, I think that we would have to have our ranchers opt in to be participating in a reference network,
Yeah,
which a lot of them
and that's
would
it.
be.
Yeah,
That's why
that's
we
an
can
Open
share
Team.
Tomcast data, because they that's their whole mission. Like they want to share this data with as many people as possible. And another hurdle that we may have to jump through is that Point Blue is the collector of much of this data. And so we have 11 ranches from Point Blue's 90 that are signed up on PastureMap, have signed data sharing agreements, like happy to share the data to be part of it. So we've got 11 of those. And then getting Point Blue to ask their ranches to participate in Open Team is a conversation that I would suggest you have with Point Blue.
Cool. I'm just so glad that you have that data policy that's similar to ours, and I think it's so important to be able to opt in. So
yeah, and I think that's a core principle, I think, across Open Team that we're starting from. And in fact, really, I think some of the strength of some of the other Open Team networks is to help create those incentives to opt in and share with and create those trusted trusted relationships. And I just highlight that those are some of the conversations coming up with the ag data ownership and value creation conversation on Wednesday next week on the 13th at Tri-Society. So if you aren't part of that and you'd like to join that remotely, or if you're going to be there, definitely be in touch and I can get you on the invite list for that. So we can provide more of those incentives for exchange with the assumption of farmer and rancher data ownership. And I would add the other thing in terms of reaching out to these Christoph, what you're mentioning in terms of having these production system case studies that go really in depth, that's very much in line with what we'll also be discussing in more depth at our meetings on Sunday and Monday at Tri-Societies, moving the community network and hub farm concepts forward. So we have representative production systems and geographies around the country. And so I think it's a really exciting use case for us to think about the network that Christine's working with there with Western Rangelands grazing systems especially. So yes, definitely some very current conversations and follow-ups.
Yeah, I would also say if folks are interested in how, like, as part of Open Team, one-to-one collaborations, and you have funding to do interoperability, we're very open to this, because we want, obviously, like, we didn't build this intending for it to be a closed ecosystem. Like, that's why we collaborate with Point Blue. Like, we want things to be built on our platform, and I'm just really grateful to Doran for it. Like 6 years ago, we were talking about this. Like, we wish that there was an ecosystem of other technology makers and providers that we could be working with, and it didn't exist. So I'm very glad that this is happening. Like everywhere else, you know, like enterprise software or like, you know, food tech, like there's other industries where like office tech is like Slack integrates with everything. Like we'd love to integrate with your platforms as well.
Christine, this is Britt from Stonyfield. Thank you for this overview. This is my first time seeing PastureMap, so for me this was really informative just to see all the capabilities. And I have two questions for you. One is there, well, they're all kind of related. Is there multi-species capability within this?
Yes.
Okay, and then is there a dairy specific capability? I mean, we see a lot of applicability to dairy in this, but I was curious, you know, because the example you showed was specific to beef.
Yeah, we have some dairies on it, mostly organic dairies that are using it to track their 120-day pasture requirement. Yeah. Just so they can show that to the inspector and, you know, not have to show them paper records. So I mean, we have a cow icon for both beef and dairy, and then That's why we built in the color coding for multi-species. So we have found people have more success with, just to be honest, like more success with grazing animals, and then with poultry, like they're moving so quickly and so many times a week that it just like gets really busy on the map. So we have operations who, if they run a pasture poultry operation, like some have it on there, but most keep their poultry operation separate and do their pork and lamb on the platform as well.
Great. And if you have a second, I'm curious about like what you see as future plans for this tool. Do you have like major areas of work that you're going into next, or a wish list of what you want to develop with it?
I think that we're in a very robust place. Like it's been 6 years, so like it's always been like, okay, we need to build out the herds, and we need to build out the grazing chart. That was a big heavy lift. And then building out forage forecasting. We actually just launched forage forecasting, and so now more of our energy is this platform's a beast now. Like honestly, there's just a lot going on with it, and educating our users and educating new folks who are just seeing it for the first time, that there's a lot you can do in PastureMap. More and more people are going to RFID and individual records. So in our product pipeline for the next couple of months, like automating that export instead of emailing CSVs to us. So like little things like that, actually making things easier to import and export information is on our roadmap. And so it's a good time to be talking to them.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Christine. It's been, I think, a great session and really timely. We're at the top of the hour here, so I want to respect everybody's time. And look forward to having you join us in our future in-depth series and talking about exciting next steps.
Thank you all for what you do.
Thanks, Christine. This was great.
Everybody, bye.
Thank you. Bye.